Hello, everybody, and welcome to my home. Today, I'm going to be telling you a little bit about Chapter 10 in the book. It's Linda Gottfredson's theory of circumscription and compromise. Hope you enjoy the video. Like, comment, and subscribe. So, a little bit about Linda Gottfredson. She was an American psychologist and a writer. She developed her theory of circumscription and compromise to explain why individuals, even when they're younger, have already narrowed down or changed their ideas of what careers and things that they could have. So it's a developmental theory and it's best used for young adults. It's not as useful if you're already an adult and you already have a career and you're already established. What is circumscription? Circumscription is a process of eliminating career choices to make a zone of acceptable alternatives. So, the way that you get to that zone of acceptable alternatives is by that same narrowing down of what your sex is, what social class you're in, what things that you like to do, or what things you've been told that you're good at. A good question that you can ask yourself, knowing the premise of this theory, is when you were younger, can you recognize moments of this theory happening in your life? Were there times where you tried to narrow down or pick out things that you could or couldn't do based off of whatever your intersectional identities were at the time? Circumscription is broken down into 4 different stages. The first stage is orientation to size and power, and that goes on from about age 3 to 5. And that's the part where children kind of figure out that there's a difference between being a child and that there's a difference between being an adult. And so, through interactions with adults, the children start to make judges about what is good for boys to do, what's good for girls to do, what's good for people of this age to do, what's good for people of this skill set to do. And that's kind of how that one developed. Stage 1 of circumscription leads into stage 2, and stage 2 is orientation of sex roles. And that is when the children from about 6 to 8 years old, they start to develop gender roles and they start to internalize all of society's messages about this is masculine and this is feminine and this is what a boy does and this is what a girl does. So going from general to more specific in the second stage, where you start to figure out what things are acceptable and what things you can and can't do. Shifting from stage 2 to stage 3, we move into orientation to social valuation, and this happens from age 9 to 13. In this stage, the children start to label what things are feminine and what things are masculine in regard to the workforce and jobs. There's a focus on how much money you'll make, whether the job is perceived as feminine or masculine based on those societal norms from stage 2, and then how much effort the job will take. And this is getting more into the narrowing down of what's happening. In this stage, stage 4, this is orientation to the internal and unique self, and it happens for children ages 14 to 18. This is where the children start to think more complexly about what their identities are and what their likes and interests are, and they start picking jobs based off of that. So, for example, I don't like being outside. I am like big chillin' in my house right now. So, I don't like being outside. So, I'm not going to pick a job if I can. I'm not going to pick a job where I'm outside building something or outside gardening. I'm going to want to pick a job where I'm inside and I'm in a cozy environment, and that fits my identity. Now, getting into the compromise portion of the theory, after going through those 4 stages, and even in between those stages, we start to get into the compromise portion where children, or I guess adults at this point, start to compromise on roles that they might like to do and try to do things that are more practical for them or more in line with the narrowed down zone of alternatives that they'd be able to do. I've done this a lot with jobs. A question that you might ask yourself at this point is, have you ever found yourself compromising on a job where you wanted to do this thing, but you felt like it would be more fitting for you to do this other thing? Getting into the self creation part of the theory, this is where Linda Gottfredson talks about how even though there are all of these external factors, we still have a lot of control and choice over what we end up doing and what we tend to want to do. Gottfredson definitely recognizes that there's a biological component and there's the nature versus nurture that we typically ask when anything comes up. And she just says that we have a little bit more control over what's happening, and she takes an internal locus of control approach with her theory. We've talked about Leslie a decent amount this semester, so I think it'd be fitting to add her into the conversation. We don't want her to feel left out. So, some questions that we can think about as a career counselor if Leslie is the client coming to us. We can think about what specific, thoughts can we draw and take away from Leslie's current situation and everything that's happened to her before this point through the lens of Gottfredson's theory. Another question we can ask ourselves is, we can ask ourselves, or we can ask it directly to Leslie if we wanted to take the time to explain the theory to her. But just for us, since Leslie isn't here, how could this theory help Leslie understand herself and maybe understand where she wants to go in the future with navigating these careers and these career choices that she's making? How does this theory help us understand what she's currently experiencing with the job and maybe some of the other intricate dynamics that are going on? What is she compromising, or how is she thinking about compromise in terms of, her social status, her race, her gender, and other things that might be involved? Finishing up with Linda Gottfredson's theory, some limitations to the theory that I noticed are the theory seems a bit culturally bound, and it seems kind of bound by Western standards of gender roles and different things like that, because in other cultures it's not the same as ours. So if you were dealing with a client that wasn't in the culture that we live in or wasn't super familiar with it, this theory might not apply to them, or it might not work as well with them. The second thing is, it seems less beneficial to people that already have careers. This seems like something you might bring up with someone that is very early on into seeking jobs, or you could explain it to children like, hey, this might be something that you're experiencing, and this might be something impacting how you're thinking about jobs in the future. Lastly, and this might not be the purpose of the theory, but I think it might help, it doesn't really explain how we as a society got or gets to a point of placing certain things in gender roles. So it doesn't really help the individual learn how they got to a point of feeling that certain things were bound by their social status or their gender or other things like that. They would need another medium of counseling to explore that. Thanks again for watching my YouTube video. I hope that you all have a wonderful day. I hope you find something magical. I hope you find something super sweet. I miss all of you, and it was a really good class, and I hope that we can still connect and be near each other even though we can't do it spatially. Bye.